Let's cross live now to Executive Director of the Iran MOU Institute for Peace and Prosperity, Daniel McAdams. Welcome to the program, sir. The recent talks between the U.S. and Iran have resulted in a 60-day roadmap towards a final deal to end the conflict in West Asia, with mediators hailing major progress. But how likely is it that this memorandum and future negotiations will actually lead to a durable peace?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on whether or not President Trump is able to rein in the Israelis. The Israelis clearly do not want this deal done, particularly Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's up for re-election in the fall and who has staked his entire, sort of political life on defeating Hezbollah in Lebanon and on winning the war against Hamas in Gaza. He's done neither, and in fact, Israel is losing badly in Lebanon, and they're desperate to suck the United States in. So the question is President Trump capable of standing up to not only the Israelis themselves, but more importantly, the Israel lobby at home, to say, no, you can't do this. We do have diverging interests. And Vice President Vance has actually sort of articulated this. The U.S. and Israel often have similar interests, but sometimes they diverge. This is one of those times. You guys need to stand down. If he's able to do that, I think it has a better than 50-50 chance of succeeding.
And Iran has reportedly agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into the country, which the U.S. Vice President described as a major milestone. However, Iran's foreign ministry stated that real negotiations on the nuclear issue have yet to start. How do you reconcile these differing statements, and what do you believe is the true extent of Iran's commitment to nuclear transparency at this stage?
Well, one of the things that's difficult to discern in this entire confrontation between the U.S. and Iran is that you will get reports. For example, the report you're citing is, I believe, from Axios, which has been incorrect many, many times. In fact, they have some sort of a conduit to the White House that often feeds them what they want them to report. Because immediately after that report, that the Iranians will accept the IAEA to return, it was immediately denied on official channels in Iran. So we, in fact, don't know what has been said by people like Professor Marandi, who's close to the Iranian government, is that this was not even discussed in Switzerland. The idea of IAEA inspectors returning was not even discussed in Switzerland. So I think there's a lot of things being made up. Certainly on the American side. So I would view this with a high level of skepticism. I don't believe it was on the agenda, and I think the Iranians would be foolish to allow things on the agenda. This is a pre-meeting meeting. This is not even negotiations in a way. This is sort of structured by the MOU. So I think they'd be foolish to allow that to happen, and they've said that it won't happen. If it does happen and they're not wary, well, then they get what they deserve, because the last time the IAEA were in there, they were spying for the CIA. They were doing targeting. They basically facilitated the attacks last June on Iran. So they had better be very careful if they do let them back in. I think in some ways they'd be foolish without some serious guidelines to let anyone in, for that matter.
Just for the record, we do try to be as skeptical as possible regarding this story. And we have Professor Marandi quite often on air here on RT International. The U.S. Treasury has waived sanctions, though, on Iranian oil for 60 days and finalized the release of $12 billion in frozen Iranian assets. Do you view these economic concessions as a necessary and effective step towards de-escalation, or do they actually carry more risks, particularly concerning their potential impact on regional power dynamics and the funding of various groups even?
Sure. By the way, that wasn't a criticism, because we reported that this morning as well. It's just a comment that it's very difficult to follow these things these days. But of course, the release, the issuance of this license was part of the MOU. And the fact that OFAC, the Treasury Department, has lived up to its part of the bargain, I think, is a very good sign. And look, allowing Iran to export oil and petroleum products and related products is a win-win for everyone. There's a lot of oil sitting out there on the water that needs to get to refineries, and there is a huge looming disaster in the United States with our strategic petroleum reserves at critical levels. Some say now, I just saw a report that it's actually under the 100 million barrels that's necessary to maintain the physical geological structure within which they are contained. So we're reaching a critical mass here. This is not necessarily just a favor for the Iranians to allow them to export their oil. We need to refill these storage facilities, and we need to get oil and especially diesel available to the Americans. Otherwise, we're not only going to run out of gas, we're going to starve because everything in the U.S. is moved by diesel.
What about President Trump? Because he issued several threats during the talks. He's just issued another one. During the talks, he said that he would hit Iran very hard again. That was a direct quote. If proxies in Lebanon cause trouble, which reportedly caused a temporary walkout by the Iranian delegation. What's your reaction to such a tactic by the U.S. president, especially during these delicate negotiations or even pre-negotiations, as you've just called them?
Well, his threats have lost their sting. They have no sting left. What is he going to hit them with? The U.S., as we know right now, is in the process of removing a lot of its assets in the Middle East, particularly its air assets. F-35s are flying back. The tankers are flying back. They've already returned, some of them. We are in the process of removing our military assets from the region. But even when they were there in absolute full force, we were able to watch for those several weeks that with the full force of the American military available to the president, he was not able to achieve those objectives through the use of force. So who on earth would believe him now when he is taking assets out of the region that he's going to, quote, hit them back harder than ever before? The question would be, with what? And what are your objectives? And how do you choose to achieve them? So the fact is nobody believes the president anymore. And it's actually quite sad to see.
All right, Daniel McAdams, Executive Director of the Iran MOU Institute for Peace and Prosperity. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.